Okay, welcome to a special episode of Hope of Fires tonight. You might look across from me and say, hey, that ain't Scott Sweetman. And you are right. I'm going to get to our guest in just a moment. This show is going to be a little bit different format. We're going to have Brother Scott and his bride Fleur come on, and all of us are going to have a chat with this gentleman here, Josiah. So here is Fleur joining us. Hey, Fleur. I just started, Fleur, and I was just saying that you and Scott and I are going to have this chat with Josiah. And Scott's going to be on momentarily. But Josiah, start with telling us about your family. I heard it when I was on the phone with you. I met my first conversation with Josiah was what, 2 hours ago? I talked to my buddy, 3. I talked to my buddy Jesse. Jesse said, hey, you should interview Josiah. I called Josiah, said, how about 7 tonight? He said, sure. And while we're on the phone, Archer was talking. So you have a very active young man in your life. Tell us about him.
So his name is Archer. He turned 3. He's definitely a boy's boy. He likes to climb up everything he can and jump off as high as he can and find a different way to jump even higher. And he's fun. He's a really cool dude. And then I have an 11 or 10-year-old daughter. Her name is Victoria. She is, I don't know, apple of my eye. She's great. I love her. I love being a dad. She's actually the reason I got out of the Army. Her mom had taken off, and so I became a single parent, and I tried to juggle the Army and being a single parent, and kind of had to weigh which was more important at the time. And so my daughter came out on top.
So you were in the Army previously, then to take care of your daughter, then you withdrew from the Army, and then now you're back in as a reservist, correct?
No, this is completely volunteer. I'm not in the military anymore.
Oh, you're not?
No. I was in the Reg Force for 7.5 years. And I joined the Calgary Highlanders originally in Calgary in 2006. And then they said, if you want to go on tour, you get a better tour as a Reg Force guy. So I signed up and I joined the 3rd Battalion PPCLI up in Edmonton. And I was there all the way until I got out in 2014.
So 2014, you get out so that you can look after your daughter. And then you have another child too, do you not?
I do, yeah. So I met my wife about 6-7 years ago now. And she's a rural family doctor. She just finished her residency. Like, she just started as a family doctor in Raymond here a couple weeks ago. So I have my son with her, and she's got a baby on the way now too, and she'll be due in September.
Wow, exciting stuff. Well, how is it like leaving your family? That's got to be a tough gig for you there, Josiah. Like, wow. But okay, first of all, you know what? This is kind of your shows. You tell us what you want to tell us about this. But man, just to kind of leave when you're going to have a new child, and you got this 3-year-old, and you got this 11-year-old or 10-year-old that you like quit the Army before so that you could be there for her. This got to be a tough decision to go, isn't it?
Yes and no. So, I've been following the Ukraine stuff for a long time. Like, I love my military history, and I love I love learning about this kind of stuff. It's always been a passion of mine. And so, I watch world events kind of with great interest from a very, I guess, a very military kind of eye view. This isn't the first time that vets have gone places. In 2014, 2015, 2016, when ISIS was raiding through Syria, Canadian vets signed up to fight with the Kurds. So they flew down to Turkey, across the border, and they were fighting alongside the Kurds just because it was the right thing to do. When Afghanistan fell this last August, you had, there's been a lot of, like, hundreds of thousands of people that have gone through the last 10 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they know a lot of the interpreters and their families there. And you had guys beg, borrow, steal trucks just so they could get into Afghanistan, get as many families out before the borders closed, because the U.S. government kind of dropped the ball there, right? So it's not the first time that vets have gone places very individual outside the boundaries of the Army, kind of put in harm's way, and not in like a mercenary role. It's just volunteers fighting at certain times for certain reasons. It happens a lot.
That's interesting that you brought that up, Josiah. The Russians, of course, have already said that any foreign citizen that enters Ukraine and is participating in the conflict is a mercenary. And they have said that they won't consider them a prisoner of war if they're captured. They'll consider them a criminal, and they'll be treated as a criminal, and they'll be tried as a criminal. So how do you feel about that aspect of it? Obviously, you don't feel like a criminal or a mercenary going into it, but certainly that's one of the things that, you know, people are warning people like yourself that are going into this conflict is that there's going to be a lot of propaganda spun around what you're doing, both positively and negatively, depending on which side of the lens you're on.
To be honest, I don't give a shit about the politics. I don't give a shit about the propaganda. Excuse my language. Sorry.
All right.
The reason, and this kind of answers your question as well about my kids. The reason I'm going, come what may, is because, you know, I took my boy to go to the big truck, and he was tickled pink, honking a big horn, drive around a big rig truck, and it just my heart was breaking because I know there's 1.5 million families that are trying to run outside the border. I look at my 10-year-old girl and I say, "Hey, honey, the president of Ukraine called and asked for anybody to help." And I kind of, you know, I looked at her and I basically said, sometimes in life you have that moment, you know, where you kind of need to see what kind of cloth you're cut from. It's a real gut check. You need to see what kind of grit you're made of, right? And right now, there's one happening for me, right? I've got 8 years of military experience, fieldcraft, chemical, nuclear, biological, radiation training, CBRN, tactical combat casualty care, so battlefield medicine. There's skills that unfortunately, and I guess I don't want to speak ill of everybody volunteering, but there is a lot of people that are joining without optimal experience.
Sure.
And
so if what you're saying, if I'm following what you're saying, you've had the career military training that's going to be an asset wherever your boots are on the ground, kind of a thing, where other people
yes,
who are in a volunteer situation would not have that level of training that you would have, that level of being able to contribute to the situation. Would that be an accurate way of saying what you're saying?
yes. And again, I'm no expert with
No.
everything, but
Well, you know a lot of shit that you've experienced and gone through, as that was your job to learn and know those things, right?
well, and some of the stuff that I'm hearing from guys on the ground is that a lot of the folks who've joined up who don't have military experience, they don't really have craft experience. So you have guys coming down with dysentery. You guys have, you know, guys coming down with gastroenteritis because they don't really understand being hygienic in an austere environment, right? So it's not just as simple as you're going over to fight the dirty reds, right? There's hygiene, there's balancing your backpack properly, there's, you know, it's not a video game, it's not a movie, right? There's real world consequences. You have people going over without breaking their boots in, so they're getting mad blisters, suddenly they're a casualty. So there's unfortunately there's just a lot of people that are going in there that are becoming more of a liability than an asset. And so when I'm talking to my daughter, I say, "Hey, honey, I got
Fleur,
skills."
can you hear?
Yeah, just 1 sec. Scott, are you okay there? Are we losing you there, bud? Fleur, you're with us?
Yeah, I can hear, and I don't know if you can hear me, but yeah,
I hear you fine. Josiah, we can hear you fine. Scott, buddy,
good.
hope I hope it works.
He's gone.
Come on back. Carry on, Josiah. So I understand what you're saying.
So that's kind of why I'm going over, is because I'm going over. I look at my kids and I say, "Hey, honey, there's a lot of kids your age, there's a lot of kids Archer's age that need help, need evacuations. They bombed the maternity hospital recently, right? Again, numbers are inflated, and that is the reality, and it really is true. The first casualty of any war is the truth, right? So Ukraine will forever be sympathetic on a world stage, and the aggressor will always be pinnacle of evil and committing war crimes, and casualties on the good side are always minimized, and the casualties inflicted are always maximized, right? So that gets into that whole geopolitical propaganda thing, and I don't really care about any of it. That's really for people's perception. It has no real difference on what I want to do. So if I can help with evacuations, if I can help with combat first aid, if I can help with some of the radiation leak, or the nuclear radiation that's coming out of Chernobyl, because I've got some of that experience, some of that training. If I can help with any of those things, or if I can help one kid, two kid, one family, it's really enough for me. It's hard to look at my kids and not want to go help another kid, right? Who's in a work situation.
So your compassion for your children and other children, that's why you're heading there.
Yeah, that's 3/4 of it. The other quarter is just because there's a lot of guys there who are very zealous, and I think it's great they were able to sign up.
Yeah.
But they just don't have a lot of field craft experience, and it does cause issues for supply chains, for medical, for everything, right?
Right.
Which I think is why the Army spends so much time training people as they do, right? So that they're not a liability in the battlefield, right?
Sure. Fleur was why we wanted to include Fleur here, is she has a colleague that is in Ukraine right now that you've had recent conversations with. Is that correct, Fleur?
Well, I'm a teacher, and last year we had, at the school I was at, we had 2 Ukrainian families, and both of them returned in I think it was July, back to the Ukraine, and unfortunately are caught in the middle of it now. They were living in Canada for about 5.5 years, and then decided to return. So yeah, just been keeping in daily contact with them. And you were talking about what is the truth and what's really happening, and that's one of the messages that they've been asking and sending me, like real pictures, real images. I mean, it's 4 actually. You consider I've been in contact with their son was my student, and then I'm in contact with the mom, and then with his sister as well. But unfortunately, they're all spread across the Ukraine because, of course, they're serving in different capacities as well. The young lady has a son who is 9 months old, so she can't fight. But she did say to me, if she didn't have her child and didn't have to take care of him, she would be out with her husband as well. But yeah, so that's my connection, is I do daily, or usually more than once or twice a day, keep in contact with them.
You had an interesting conversation the first night, Fleur. You guys hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Sorry. For some reason, we had some technical difficulties. You had an interesting conversation with him the first night, Fleur, and over the second night as well. And it was one of the messages she really wanted you to get out about what they wanted from us. Did you want to share that?
Just in regards that it was true? Is that what you mean? Like, I'm sorry, I don't know which
what
one.
They don't want, what they're concerned about the West accepting
Oh,
or
yeah,
believing.
they're concerned that the West believes that the Ukrainians are the things that the Russians are in their propaganda, that they're actually murderers and that they had started this conflict. So,
well,
and that, going back to what we were talking about before, and I completely respect where Josiah is coming from on the ground, but one of the issues and you're completely right, this is historical. Far back, the Spanish Civil War was mostly originally fought by foreign volunteers. Throughout the history of armed conflict, people have been going over on their own, is a precursor, or if their own nations weren't willing to get involved in the altercation of the fight or the action or whatever it was being called. So there's definitely a strong history of doing that. Where it becomes an issue, so right now, as you know, the Ukraine has called for volunteers, basically anyone that's willing to come and is able to come and provide their own equipment and their own transportation, and that there's things that they need to do. Some governments, the United Kingdom, for example, have endorsed their people going on their own. And then other countries haven't. Canada, for example, hasn't officially endorsed people like Josiah going on his own. And some of the concern there is that the propaganda that can be turned against the country. And historically, it's been an issue where countries are concerned that their citizens on the ground getting involved in an armed conflict unofficially can drag the country itself into difficult positions or issues concerning their relationship, in this case, NATO. So Russia,
I could sort of address that, because I mean the UN has had many issues where when Haiti happened, right? They had, I think it was 17. There was an African UN detachment, and they got caught organizing an underage prostitution ring. Those were UN troops. They were all like from Somalia or something like that in Haiti, and they did some really bad shit, right? So I understand what you're saying, but really, as bad as it is to see, you know, American dead or Russians captured Canadian volunteer or Canadian prisoner or criminal or whatever, right? It does happen. If you guys have followed Justin Trudeau, do you guys remember the two gentlemen that were caught in the Philippines?
Mhm.
And they were beheaded on YouTube. One of those guys' son, they were both in the military, and Justin Trudeau did nothing, didn't raise a finger to try to help save those guys. I know both of the sons of one of those gentlemen that was beheaded there. It's a reality of the world we live in, and I'm aware that leadership in Canada right now isn't what it could be or used to be. But Justin Trudeau is, I don't know.
yeah, regardless of leadership, and I completely agree with you. And I think, being from Alberta, that we have a unity of views on government that's occurring right now and things. But there is an issue that people have to be aware of, that these types of conflicts happen both on the ground and in the court of public perception, right? And so the Ukrainian people, and this is where the Ukrainian people that Fleur was speaking to, really want to make sure that the message that gets out is clear and concise and honest about who the aggressors are here and who's committing the atrocities. And there is legitimate concern that Russia.
Are you confused about that, Josiah?
Well, I think you might have disconnected when I was talking about it, Scott. But the first casualty of war really is the truth, right? So your perceived defender is always the recipient of war crimes, right? It's targeted assaults on civilians. It's right, and so numbers of their casualties are usually, you know, decreased, right? And the amount of soldiers, like the Russian soldiers they capture, is always inflated, right? So, and it goes back to like I think it was the 1800s. There's a gentleman who basically came up with kind of those doctrines of war about how to manipulate things, right? So, and without getting like a geopolitical debate, I mean, I also understand the Russian side of this, right? Like NATO has been encroaching further and further east, and he's warned them several times. He warned them in 92, 97, 2006, 2010, and then 2014. He's like, "Okay, I'm taking Crimea." Like, I understand the bad sides, and I guess I want to be respectful for. I understand there's civilians who are caught in the crossfire of all this stuff, right? It is political that has caused something like this, but no side is totally innocent. No side is totally at fault. Like,
I think what we're saying is that you're going over, you're risking your life as a father, you're putting a lot of things at risk, and you're taking Canada with you, right? So whether you plan to or not, whether you agree with the government or not, you represent Canada. So things that happen to you are obviously going to affect Canada, and it's going to affect how we feel about the conflict. So that adds another dimension of pressure. The same, you served in uniform, and you know that you wear that pressure. Here, there's no uniform, there's no protection from those types of situations that you would normally have the army or the government backing you up in. And so that adds an extra dimension. I think what most people would like to know is beyond personal bravery, you've been a professional soldier. What really is the final point that you get to where you say, okay, sanctions aren't enough, writing, petitions isn't enough, carrying a sign isn't enough. When do I put on boots and head over? What? And again, I understand what you're saying about your family and the families that are there, but you're talking about a monumental decision that has ramifications for you, your family, our country. What got to that point for you? I think people would really like to know when that point where you said, okay, something has to be done.
It's just the right thing to do.
Understood. But was there a point where you got to the point that you said the right thing for me to do is to leave Canada as a volunteer and join the armed conflict?
About a day after the president called for volunteers, and I understand the skill set that I have. I had to weigh all the pros and cons. I understand that, my family doesn't get a payout if I get killed over there. Like, I'm not part of the army. There's no affiliation there.
Are you of Ukrainian descent, Josiah?
There is some in there.
Yeah.
Not a ton, but
no. Okay.
It's just the right thing to do.
I understand.
There's families that are trying to egress into Poland, which refugee crisis is always kind of a shit show.
Right.
And again, I don't think anyone's obviously there's a lot of help needed. And I think certainly I feel that countries should be doing more officially and stopping what's basically going to turn into a genocide very quickly if something's not done. So, but when you have a chance to talk to somebody like yourself, who's making the decision to go over without the support of our government, without the support and infrastructure of the Geneva Convention, etc., protecting you, that's a monumental decision that goes beyond just signing up to join the Canadian Army. Not that that's a light decision, obviously, but do you understand what I'm saying? And I think there, as a human being, we all look at those things and we all say, I'd really like to do something here. And it's something that we all struggle with so many things in our lives. And I really like some insight into, if you can share it with us, that moment where it went not from just being the right thing to do, but it's the thing that you're going to do. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes.
Like there has to be that moment of, darn it, I'm going to do this thing.
And really, it just kind of came down to when he called, I took that gut check, right? I have the skills that can be used. I know like CBRN and TCCC and military doctrine, battlefield, and I have these skills. Why would I not? How can I look at my daughter and say, hey, sometimes you need to stand up for the little guy. It's that whole, I want my kids to be sheepdogs, right? And a sheepdog is just as violent as a wolf, but instead of being a wolf, it protects sheep, right?
What about this conflict? There's conflicts going on all the time around the world.
Yep.
And often, as you said, there's clearly an aggressor that started things and, that are often civilians and other people are trapped in it. What about this particular conflict touched a nerve with you and really made you decide that this was the one? Because as you know, and as you said, there's a lot going on in the world where someone with skill set could be used.
Related to that, Josiah, you made a couple of times about he made the call, the president called. Like, it sounds like he called you picked up the phone and, hey, there's the president of Ukraine, Josiah, come on down and help. Is that, or you're saying when he made the announcement on the news asking for people?
When he made the announcement.
Al, have you watched him? He's a very powerful speaker.
Yeah.
He's maybe one of the best leaders I would say that the world has at this moment.
Really?
So I can see watching him why you would feel that motivation.
He's an extremely good orator.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I guess I need to be clear. He's not, I know he's the media's darling right now.
Well, I think he's the Ukraine darling, not only the media's.
Okay, but
the Ukrainian people believe in him, so.
But he's not totally clean either, right?
Okay, so that's the furthest to my question, Josiah. So you've got some reservations about the person that gave you the call, right? And
it really comes down to the families. It comes down to the kids. I look at my kids and I say, Kate, I've got a 10-year-old, I've got a 3-year-old, I got a baby on the way. I have a skill set that can be used in this environment. I know there's nobody that's totally innocent, somebody totally guilty. This is a big issue. There's lots of, I don't care about the politics. If I can get there and help one family across the border, that's a win for me.
It's all
I'm interested in the.
It's all a
Sorry, Al.
humanitarian thing to protect it, get kids and families out to a safe place. That's
Yeah,
your.
I'm actually interested in the process that you go through in order to participate in it, like,
yeah,
or to be able to
did you
go,
sign
kind
up
of thing.
with the International Legion for the Territorial Defense of the Ukraine?
So I did, and the problem is that the embassy started getting so bogged down with a lot of airsofters and paintballers that wanted to go that didn't have experience, that the whole process that they were hoping to attract strictly military veterans or people with combat or medical skills, it ended up getting bogged down. So when I talked to a gentleman at the embassy, he said, if you're squared away and you're good to go, hop flight, take a train, get there, and then they'll get you hooked up. I think there's 500 Canadians there right now. And
So do you go to Poland? Is that your
Yes.
destination?
Yeah. And I think there's 3 small towns. I don't have my notes in front of me, but there's a couple.
No, I was just wondering.
There. And there's a couple staging points. They'll get you across the border. If you don't have any combat experience, they give you like 3 to 7 days of training, and then they send you east. And if you do, they just send you right in. So the embassy did try their best to have everybody well vetted and all that, but you can't stop people just hopping on a plane and going. And the amount of people that showed up, unfortunately, bogged down the whole embassy. Like, they're not a whole government organization, right? There's like, what, maybe 200 people in the building, if that, right? They don't have the resources that, say, the government of Canada would do if they're vetting people to go overseas. So I do feel bad for them, but for me, it's just as simple. I talked with the guy. I was waiting to hear back from the embassy, and they just got so bogged down. He's like, man, if you're squared away and you're good to go, just get your shit together and get on a plane.
So what kind of timeline is that for you?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just wondering what kind of timeline that is for him. I mean, the people needed help yesterday, right? So
well, and ideally, it's as I'm going. I've actually had a doctor here in Lethbridge. He had heard about the bombing of that maternity hospital. He was like, "Okay, man, give me a wish list of all your medical equipment that you want, that you need, that you could dream of, and I'll get it here next day delivered." So I'm waiting on some medical equipment that's coming in, not just for combat first aid, but that doctors and rear hospitals need. So IV tubing, suture kits, IV syringes, and this is kind of the other problem that's happening in Ukraine right now. Because the president gave guns to everybody, there's actually been some gang violence that's been going on, because now gangs are very heavily armed. There's been an issue where gangs are actually robbing field hospitals and then trying to sell the equipment back to doctors.
Again, that's a pretty historical perspective, right? You were talking about the ISIL situation. And so historically, once you develop a pipeline where people can stream into and join the conflict, there's a lot of bad players, if you can use that term, that will use that same pipeline to their own advantage.
So I just need to get as much. So I'm waiting for medical equipment right now. That's going to come in, and then I'm driving up to Calgary here. I should be gone within a week.
And then, so it sounds like you go to one of these 3 towns in Poland, and then this is where the staging area, where you get kind of coordinated and kind of, here's the role you're doing, and here's the guys you're leading, and that kind of thing. And here's your gear, and away you go. That kind of, is that the idea?
That's my guess. I mean, I could talk to you more when I get back, but
yeah. Okay.
Are you required to take your own gear? I know that they were asking people to bring their own protective equipment, their own.
Yes, and that was, I guess,
carriers.
That's been a pretty big issue, is because a lot of guys don't have their firearms license, and that's what's required to buy bulletproof plates in Canada. So a lot of guys are trying to go over to Europe.
Province, yeah.
They're trying to go over to Europe and then buy plates there. It's just going to be supply things, right? Guys are going to get there and not find plates, or find one plate, or,
I would say in that case, body armor is regulated by province. So each province has their own regulations, and some have none. So if it could be sourced there. Here we have to have a license, or our pals will work as a license.
What are you suggesting? You go to Saskatchewan or BC and buy body armor?
Well, there are provinces. I'm not going to say which ones without looking at a map, but it's all determined provincially. It's under the Body Armor Act. That's not the correct name for it. But in Alberta and other provinces, you either have to apply for a license if you're in a job that requires body armor, or if you have a firearms acquisition license, that's considered a government issued license to own body armor. But other provinces don't have that, and it's changed recently over the last 10 or 15 years. So procurement of things is really a patchwork quilt, right? That's what Josiah is saying, is that, what applies here doesn't necessarily apply in another province, and especially if it's not going through one coordinated place, then it's more difficult for volunteers to get kitted up and move out.
So
I'm just wondering how long did you decide just to go for? Like, is it for 2 weeks, a month, or?
Well, about 5 weeks is my max before I have to get back, and I have to continue working before I get fired, kind of thing.
What's your day job, Josiah?
Sorry?
What's your day job?
Well, I actually have a back injury from the Army.
Yeah.
So they sent me to school to a program, so I just finished a program at the college. It was a 2-year animal science program.
Okay.
And I'll be working with livestock. My father-in-law's got a buffalo farm.
Okay.
So I'm working with animals and stuff like that right now. But so I can go for like 5 weeks is my max before I got to get back. And I do have little kids here, and I can't throw that all on my wife right now. I'm not in the Army. She doesn't have those supports in place. If she did, maybe I'll be able to stay longer, but she doesn't, so I can't.
Because even if the conflict goes down, they're going to need help rebuilding. I mean, not that that's the position you're in, but
maybe 6 months later I could come back
and doing things like that.
But we'll see how that goes.
Right. You must have do you have some buddies that you served with that are also going on this same? Are you connecting with some of your buddies to do this together?
So I've talked to a few. Some are very against it. Some are very hesitant. Some are leaning this way, and some are going, but very few from what I've heard. It's and who knows? I might meet a bunch while I'm there, and I'd be like, "Hey, I didn't know you were going to be here." So we'll see how that goes. Figure it down. But
well,
sorry, go ahead.
I just gonna say I'm certainly hoping you're going to be very successful in keeping people safe and getting them out of harm's way. Like I hope you tremendous success with that, and keep yourself safe so you can come back to your family.
No, I really hope we get to have the exit interview for this.
Yes,
and hear how you made out.
Yes, in 6 weeks we'd love to have that discussion about that, the success stories of how you were able to go there and work with some people and help keep people safe. So that would be lovely stories to hear.
We'll do that then.
Fleur, I've been standing all over you, Fleur. Fleur, is there a question you want to ask Josiah?
I just wanted to say, as someone who has people in the Ukraine, that I'm very thankful that you're going, and it's a horrific thing that's going on, and people need to step up. And the only time evil happens in the world is when good people don't step up. So I'm very proud to have had a chance to meet you, and it's wonderful. I just hope you're safe.
Yeah.
Thank you. Me too. I got a lot I got to get back to. So.
No kidding. Well, yeah. Keep yourself well, Josiah, and we really look forward to hearing from when you come back with amazing success stories. Okay.
And thank you for sharing with everyone tonight, Josiah.
Yeah. Thanks very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys.
Okay. Keep well.
Cheers.